That's funny. Yeah, that's a very quick third. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So what's the question
One
in
of
this one?
Okay, so
Is it from
the
Petosis or the other?
pitosis.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get the exact thing. Basically, it's how to defend drops and when is a good third timing.
Sorry, say one more time.
How do I defend drops and when to get the third hatch.
Oh yeah, okay, wow, this is, oh, look at that supply, 23 out of 39. Okay, yes, very good questions for Petosis. What league are we looking at? This is Platinum?
Silver.
Silver, ah, okay. Oh, Pitos is actually spending the money way better than a silver player normally does. Just needs a slightly better build order. Cool. Okay. So, yeah, basically a standard build, and you can apply this to all matchups as Zerg. So this is a really good one for you guys watching at home. Remember, guys, no questions too silly. I want more silver replays. I want more bronze replays, more gold replays. I want more dumb questions because you know what? Every day in my stream when I'm coaching, there is a diamond player in chat who's like, oh, I didn't know about this fundamental mechanic, or I didn't know exactly you could use shift for this, or I didn't know you could use control click for this. Like, there are so many things that people don't know about in StarCraft, even after playing for thousands of hours. So I guarantee you guys, there is no such thing as a dumb question. There is only people who remain ignorant because they're too afraid to ask questions. So build order, what you're gonna do normally is 17, 17, 17. So just think of 17 supplies, your normal number, where you go 17 hatch or pool. Doesn't matter which one you go for first, and then you go for the other. So as long as you get your gas, your pool, your hatch all on 17 supply in whatever order you prefer, depending on how you prefer to play the game, then that's amazing. Most people like hatch, then gas, then pool, because it lines up nicely where you can build both your queens at pretty much the same time from each hatchery. And that's really nice because then you've got them both injecting at the same time, so you can create a macro cycle where you kind of go inject, inject, and then all the lava's just popped out, so you spend the lava and build overlord straight away, and it allows you to take what can become a very tedious, overwhelming production cycle of Zerg into this super neat, organized, compact thing, which then frees you up to spend your 8 actions on scouting and harassing and doing all the other cool stuff, right? And this is something where most Zerg players really struggle on this in the early days, because they're like, inject the hatch, maybe build a drone or two, okay, let's go do something with my Zerglings. Oh, let's inject a hatch. Build an overlord. Oh, let's build a drone. Maybe I should inject this hatch. And basically they end up, by the time they've injected their third hatchery and spent all their lava, they're looking back at the main base. And they're like, oh, it's time to inject again. And they just, like 99% of their time is spent just trying to build units. Whereas once you set up a good macro cycle, you go inject, inject, inject. Hold down that button to build a ton of Zerglings. Hold down button to build a few overlords. Bam, you've got 30 seconds till the next macro cycle, or 25 seconds. You can do whatever you want in that time. Back to the question, the third base timing. About 30 to 36 supply is when a lot of people like to get it. So you can pick a number, maybe 32, maybe any time before 44 supply is usually pretty good for a nice quick third. And even if your opponent's doing some sort of rush, it's not a bad thing to take a third. It's just you might not want to drone it up straight away, but it works as a production facility. So you never want to be afraid to build a hatch. And if you're ever like Petosis in this scenario where you go, oh wait, damn, I've got a lot of money, feel free to put down a macro hatchery or even a fourth base and just use it as an extra production facility. So whenever you're floating extra minerals, always just throw down more hatcheries. But the big problem here for Petosis is Petosis was supply blocked there and only built 2 overlords. At this stage, you want to have kind of ever ramping up overlords. We go inject, inject, inject. Ooh, it's a macro cycle, builds drones. But you'll notice Petosis didn't save any lava for overlords. So normally you'll always save a few lava. Every time you build a round of units, you build overlords as well. But what Petosis is doing is the common mistake. It does most of a macro cycle, went inject, 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 built drones, didn't build any overlords, and on the next cycle is going to get supply capped. And so he's going to be trapped in this constant cycle. So a lot of people say, how do I stop getting supply blocked? And you can apply this to Protoss and Terran to a certain extent as well, but especially with Zerg, I think it's the easiest to get a rhythm down. Once you think about it and you say, if I just build overlords every round, and it can start off at the start of the game as 1 overlord each time you inject. At this stage, you're up on 3 bases, you've got quite a lot of drones, you're building like 5 overlords per round. You're making sure this supply gap is always increasing. So basically, you think of it, you look at your supply number and you say, you know what? I should be 40 out of 60 to make sure I don't get supply capped. You get to 70 supply, I should be 70 out of 100 or even 110 to make sure I never get supply capped. 110 out of 180. Like basically building overlords ahead of time, you lose a little bit of opportunity cost. It's like a small inefficiency. As you get really good, you start to try to stay close to that to like really improve your efficiency. But early on, it's more important to just not get supply blocked, because when you get supply blocked, I don't know if you guys know this, but hatcheries actually don't produce lava on their own. Once they've got 3 or more lava on the hatchery stops producing lava. Only injects will add more lava to it. So your actual overall production slows down. You can't build units. So if you were wanting to build drones, they're not being able to get out and mine straight away. It slows your entire economy to a halt. It kind of shuts everything down, and you end up, like Pitosis is here, with suddenly this huge bank of money. So if you guys ever find yourself banking, remember, more production facilities. If I was Pitosis right now, I would throw down 3 or 4 macro hatcheries, 5th base, maybe even a 6th base, and that would give me a huge amount of production, and that would be absolutely amazing here.
Also, in Legacy of the Void, injects can now queue up. So if you do inject, hold shift, and just click the hatchery a bunch of times, the queen will inject multiple times.
And people always ask about that. That's a great point. So it doesn't mean like 6 injects will pop out and 30 lava appears on the hatchery. But if we got this queen and we said inject, shift, click, 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 you know, keep telling it to inject, she'll put 5 injects into the hatchery, and one of them will pop, and the next one will automatically start without you doing anything. And that'll just keep happening. So you could even remove the queen away from the hatch if you really wanted to, and that hatchery will just keep on spawning large amounts of lava. So everybody miss macros, everybody misses injects. It's really important as a player to remember to do this just once or twice in the mid and then again in the late game. When you go, oh, I've got 100 energy on all my queens, spend 10 or 15 seconds just queuing up injects on every hatchery, and that way they're going to just keep producing lava all on their own. Awesome. So the question was 3rd base timing. What was the other part of the question? Drops. Ah, how do I defend against drops? Okay.
So this drop was actually like defended like pretty well, and like and Zerg didn't take any damage, so it's fine.
One thing is control groups. So we can see that Pitosis doesn't use control groups. So this is one of the biggest problems for players who use that F2 button, that select all army button, and especially as a Zerg player, it's a bad crutch. So you always want to get used to control grouping your units. This is one of the fundamental things where back in the day we didn't have an F2 button, and it was good because it forced us to learn how to control group compulsively. Where you would just be like, control 1, compulsively, control 1, put that army on control 1, and you can have a drop defense squad on number 2, or maybe we've got hatcheries on 3, so we could say 4, and you could say, you know what? This guy keeps dropping me, or I just want to be prepared for drops. You know what? Let's take 7 hydras, and I'm going to go Alt 4. Alt actually is called control group stealing. You guys want more info on that? There's a link in chat. Basically what it does is it puts your units on a control group while also taking them out of your main army or any other group that they're in. So you could go Alt 4 and leave those hydras in your main base, and then you can seamlessly, you can reselect your main army, go defend your 4th, your 3rd, run around without actually removing those hydras from the main. And that's your normal setup. You apply this to Protoss and Terran as well. There's normally 2 exposed edges to your base. So yeah, occasionally a drop will hit your natural. Pretty rare, right? What are they going to do? Fly through the middle of the map into your natural? They're usually going to run into your army and die if they do that. So if you think about this from the Terran's perspective, look, where's he always dropping? He comes in from this edge here, or he comes in from the main. So if you have a drop defense squad on, let's say, the corner in the main, and your main army is already going to be down in this area defending from frontal pushes, so it's always pretty close to defend the other edge anyway. You can also do things like throw a few spores. You identify where the edges are, you say, oh, let's throw a few spores down here, or a few spores up here. And that also helps zone out these drops really, really well. But definitely getting used to using control groups makes your life easier. And the main thing is having more map vision, which is something Pitosis is really lacking, and that's also tied to the fact that Pitosis uses F2. Notice how Pitosis wanted to go for a Zergling counter, saw the drop and said, oh crap, had to select F2 and accidentally brought the Zergling counter attack home. So this crutch of using F2 all the time is actually stopping Pitosis from counter attacking, but also from seeing what's on the map. Once you get used to using your control groups properly, the big thing that you do is you leave Zerglings. And you guys will see this in my games, you'll see it in the higher level replays we watched today. There's going to be Zergling spotters all over the map. And the thing is, once you stop using F2, those Zerglings just stay there because they're not in your control group. So that becomes this amazing thing where you're always prepared for everything that comes your way. You're always in control because you see things ahead of time. The players who have an F2 habit never see these drops coming because they don't have the map vision. So even though we see Pitosis has done some really great Overlord spreads on the edge, and you know, you could have even more because this is such a huge map. You could have like Overlord spread all over the edges, right? To spot those drops. If you can actually have Zergling spotters outside the base, that's really cool as well. Because many times in this game, there's no vision outside the base. And the Terran could have pushed across, sieged up here, and Pitosis wouldn't have known about it a lot of the time until the army was on the doorstep. Other than that, Pitosis, remember to get your Hydra upgrades. We were talking about it just before. Hydras suck without upgrades. These Hydras didn't get... I think they didn't even get the movement speed. Okay. So they didn't get either Hydra upgrade, and this is really common. I see a ton of players in Bronze, Silver, Gold going for Hydras and not getting upgrades, and then also overcomplicating their composition. So with Pitosis, we're seeing Banelings, Spire, Hydras, Corruptors, double upgrades. There's so many different things to focus on here. I think it's... And a Hive as well. This is like so much tech. But I think it's much more important to focus on just really having a tight composition. So say just Lingbane Hydra would have been more than enough in this game. And it's going to be more than enough for lower.
I like Roach Hydra for lower level. Because Lingbane Hydra, it's a bit volatile of a composition, while Roach Hydra is just, yeah, I fight you and I have more stuff, I kill you.
It's a little bit more A-move friendly, but like at the same time, yeah, I totally agree with you on that one, Captain Fair. But at the same time, like you don't want to like, if someone really likes this composition, like learn it, get used to it, you know, get used to trying to engage with it. Just remember, if you start struggling, Roach Hydra is going to be a bit easier to control because you can kind of just A move it and it's always going to get the job done.
Also, it's easier to macro.
Really good point from both of you guys. Captain Failing and Blue both saying, actually, big point, because those units are more expensive, unlike Lingbane, where you need a ton of lava, you need more hatcheries, more injects, going Roach Hydra, it's much easier to spend your money. You don't get punished as hard for slipping up on your injects and that sort of stuff. That being said, you know what? You go Lingbane Hydra. It's a great way to work on that spending and all that sort of stuff. And, yeah, a lot of these drops would have been crushed if the Hydras... I mean, these Hydras didn't get attack moved, unfortunately. We're building mutas. You know, basically, too many complicated units. If we just had Hydra upgrades and we were just building more Hydras... I mean, Pitosis has done a great job expanding. And has done a great job actually building economy. Massive job for Silver League. Whereas the Terran's just kind of sitting there on two bases. And we can see the Terran actually doesn't have proper upgrades. These Marines don't have stim or combat shields. You know, this is not a great army for the Terran. Just well upgraded Hydras would do the job. But Mutas are a very fragile control-based unit. So you never want to build Mutas unless you guys are good with control groups. So never build Mutalisks unless you have a control group. Because Pitosis is trying to go send these across the map, but with no way to select them without also sending the rest of the army into the fight. So this means these mutas are going to meet a horrible, horrible fate at some point. 100%. I know this is going to happen. I can see into the future. I'm actually like a Warlock Seer or some shit. Because I've seen this 1,000 times before and I'm going to see it again. It's like my early games in Wings of Liberty. You're gonna run into some Thors.
Maybe. not in the Thor's
no!
Wait, no, okay, one Thor.
I am a Warlock. I told you guys I could see into the future. Oh, no. No. Ow. We've all been there, so a moment of silence for Pitosis. Thanks for sending the replay in, dude. That one, I mean, the thing is, you can still win this game from here. If you can get a bit more gas income and like just go mass Hydra with upgrades, but you're going for like Corruptors and stuff. Like there's too many overcomplicated units here. Try to always stick to a simpler composition, guys. Roach Hydra, Hydra Lingbane. If you're Terran, maybe it's just Marine Marauder Medevac or Marine Marauder Siege Tank. If you're Protoss, maybe it's Charged Arcanum model. And the thing is, if you just build a lot of that army, get the right upgrades, you're gonna actually progress really well. And it's really good because it keeps your focus simpler. Many players are trying to open up the tech to get the correct units for each situation. But I think you should always give yourself a bit more time to get good at the mid-game basic composition before you focus on all those advanced units. And this is something you still see me in Zerg vs Protoss. I never go past like Roach Hydra Lurker. That's just my comp. I try to win with that comp every game because there's so much I can do with that composition. And I know I, as a GM random player, can get so much better at that before I improve at it. You know, It doesn't matter what the position looks like. This looks scary. This looks brutal. I guarantee you, Hydraling Bane would have rolled over the top of this. So GG, well played. This was a good replay. It's going to drag on a bunch.
I want to actually mention something. I think this is one of the cases of like misidentifying what's going on. Like we saw that the Terran only attacked by doing like big drops, but even if the Terran didn't do the drops and just like 1-8 across the map, we would have seen the same outcome. And basically, at the end of the day, it's not the drops that's causing problems, but that you just don't. The Zerg just does not have enough stuff to fight the army.
Yep. I think that's a really good point, right? You know, definitely this wasn't the sort of game where there's a drop hitting 3 different bases and we're struggling to multitask. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like, oh crap, the army's in my main. Where did that come from? But yeah, absolutely. It's a numbers game in this scenario. You know, it's not about the drop. It's the same thing as if that army sieged up on the front. You know, just try to jump on that. So awesome. I think this was a really good silver replay. Holy Undead says, how should you juggle your early defensive queen energy for transfuse and creep tumors? So normally the way you do that is you might skip 1 inject to get creep started. It's totally your call, maybe on the first or probably the second round of injects. But usually you just build an extra queen for creep. And if you want to have a real focus on creep spread, or you really like using queens for defense, you can get 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 queens. And you put those on a special control group, and I use those as your defense or creep queens. And basically you just use those to kind of spread your creep around. We were looking at a Zerg vs Terran game before, where the queens got killed by Hellbat Cyclone. So normally, like if you want to use those queens for defense as well, you want them to have transfuse. So maybe you only drop 3 or 4 creep tumors and you save the rest for transfuse until a bit later in the game when you've got more army out, you feel safer, and then you go, okay, now we can just drop as many creep tumors as we want. But even just getting a few creep tumors started early can spread a long way.
So let me ask you a quick question. Do you want questions from chat? Like any that are resembling close to the replay, or just anything that is like...
I mean, if it's an interesting question, just go for it, use your own discretion. Obviously, regarding the replay is always nicer, but if there's something else as well, just grab it. I mean, we're happy to take questions as they come in. We want this to be open, so there's going to be Protoss players watching who are like, well, I don't have anything about TVZ here. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, okay, so then there was something at the start. How rigorously should I follow a build? Builds are on, like, spawning tool. When you're looking at builds and spawning tool, they're very specific. How do you like identify key points, or what do you focus on more or less?
That's a really good question. That's actually a really good question. So I always use the analogy of a build is a tree. The build that you see written on spawning tool is the trunk of the tree, and basically you start out kind of memorizing that build. But as you get experience with it, you start learning how to adjust in different scenarios. So that build is going to be in the most standard situation where your opponent's expanding and macroing up and playing what we call a normal game, which is really not as common as you might think, especially in the lower leagues. You very rarely get a normal game. So people go, what the hell? This doesn't work. Oh. So what you want to learn is the reactions to different things. And those reactions are your branches. So it might be my opponent never even took a natural expansion. Bam. It's only 3 minutes 30 into the replay, and already I've said, hey, he's on 1 base still. Scrap what I'd normally do with the build, build a shit ton of defense, because he's going to be able to kill me. If he's on 1 base, he's not expanding. I mean, I don't know what he's doing. I just got to build a lot of defense. You scrap the build. If you defend that attack, though, you can say, okay, I've defended it. Let's go back to the build. Now, this is where learning a build becomes very important in terms of the order. So it's not about the game timer. A lot of people look at the game timer. That's not important. Obviously, like sometimes I'll put a build on spawning tool and I'm too lazy to write it up in a detailed manner in terms of do this, then this after this, and I'll just let it grab the timings from the replay. It'll say 47 seconds, build a supply depot. 2 minutes 36, make sure you build that in, get the engineering bay. But what you should actually be remembering as you're learning the trunk of that build is the order of things. So if you have to defend a 1 base rush, and then you want to get back on track with your build, how do you do it? Because the game timer doesn't mean anything anymore. You're 5 minutes into the game, but you're trying to do things that you would normally have done in 3 minutes. How do you accommodate for that? Now, if you're really adjusting, if you're obsessed with the game timer and you can't break that habit, you make an assessment. You say, okay, let's imagine, I think we're delayed 2 minutes. You just make a guess and you just follow your build, but 2 minutes delayed. But a better way to do it is to say, what's next? So if you've learned your build the proper way, Terran's a good example. You say, okay, I've got my starport building the medevac. My factory is building the siege tank. This is the moment where I build my second and third barracks. After my second and third barracks, that's when I build my third command center. When my third command center is done, that's when I build my engineering bay. So you kind of link it up so it's one action happens after another. So even if you've stopped early on and you've been pulling SCVs and losing workers to some rush and everything's been chaos, you can look at the game and say, where am I in the build? And you can say, oh, I've got 1 barracks, 1 factory, 1 starport. Next thing is 2 more barracks. What happens after the barracks? Third command center. And you just kind of find your way back to the build. You converge back into that point where you're trying to follow the build that you know, because that's where you're efficient, that's where you do things. So it's really cool because, yeah, basically sometimes you will branch off, but you will branch back into the trunk of the build and try to get back on that solid track. So how important is it to follow those builds exactly? I think it's amazing as a way to help you improve. And I think if you're very new to the game, you don't really need to learn a build. When you first start, right through bronze and silver, you can basically maybe just learn up to 20 or 30 supply. 17 hatch, 17 gas, 17 pool, something like that, right? You basically, like, you learn your build order, okay? For the first few minutes, just to get your expansion, get your basic things down. And from there, you follow fundamentals. So maybe you're just focusing on the rules of SCV production, building depots, adding production, and trying to spend your money. But once you have a bit more experience in the game, you understand your tech paths, you've had enough games to experience building things and building armies and fighting a little bit, then, you know, maybe you're in silver, maybe you're in gold, you say, you know what, I want to improve, let's actually learn an exact build order. And that's where you go, you learn the trunk of the build, and then you get good at the trunk, you get good at the basics, and then you keep dying to different things. And each time you die, it's this amazing learning opportunity where you say, oh crap, I died to that because I was just following my build. I probably should have spotted this. And you look at it and you look at your replay and you try to figure out what was the tell. Oh, he was only on 1 base. I forgot to scout for that. I got to remember to scout every game. And you start adding in these scouting and these safety checks and these reactions. And that's where you become a fully fledged StarCraft player. And there is no point where you become good at StarCraft, guys. You can be in Diamond, and you know what? Coming up from Plat, you just realize how far there is to go. You can be in GM, you realize how far there is to Pro. People always ask me, Pig, why don't you play in more tournaments? I'm pretty sure you're amazing at this game. You'd be winning WCS if you played. And I say, oh, sweet, sweet, beautiful angels. I love that you guys, you know, boost my confidence and my ego by saying that. But I have a true appreciation for the vast gap in skill between me and those top guys playing in WCS. Because StarCraft is a game where there's always so much to improve. And that's what's great about it. There's no point where you're suddenly respectable and good. A lot of people are like, oh, I just want to get to Diamond so then I'm good. So then I know what I'm doing. Speak to a Diamond player, what are they going to say? I got no idea what I'm doing. This game's really, really hard. I don't know what the hell's going on. You know, like there's so many things for me to learn. I'm always learning new things and getting more of an idea of what I'm doing, but it's always a work in progress.
Oh.
Alright, go ahead with the next replay first. Like,